Day 23 of the Diddy trial, a lot happening. There was a woman going by the name of Jane, who testified for a long time today, both on direct examination by the prosecution and on cross-examination by Diddy's defense lawyers. We'll talk about that in a minute. But first, let's do some housekeeping. Last night, a letter came in from Diddy's counsel seeking a mistrial of the entire case based on some inconsistencies in the testimony offered between the different witnesses. Derek, that was cast aside with one swift stroke of the pen by the judge.
That's right. Before the jury even came in this morning, because they handle these motions before they bring in the witnesses and bring in the jury. And this motion, as we discussed, was about discrepancies in the testimony. So really what happened was Brianna Bongalan had testified. She testified about an incident that she says occurred at Cassie's apartment in 2016. And Diddy came in, dangled her over a 17th floor balcony, and then pushed her into some furniture,
causing her to sustain some bruising, some injuries, and also obviously some emotional trauma as well.
Right. And during the course of her testimony, she says, these were drug-fueled days of my life. Some of it is hazy, but I think this happened around September 26th of 2016. Cassie, during her testimony, also testified about this alleged incident, and she said that she saw it happen. It was at her apartment. She said, I saw it. Subsequently, there were text messages between Cassie and a woman named Christina Coram, who has also testified. She was like Diddy's chief of staff. And in that text exchange, Cassie described it as finding out something, as if she hadn't personally witnessed it, but just found out about it third hand.
Basically, to paraphrase, she says, I found out that Brianna was hung over the balcony. Now, meanwhile, she had testified that she witnessed that. So that's an inconsistency. You would never say, I found out something happened. If you witnessed it, say, I saw it.
That's right. And Diddy's defense team said the prosecutors know this because they prep their witnesses. They know what kind of testimony they're going to elicit. They've seen the text messages, and they basically allowed this perjured testimony to take place on the stand, which is clearly only one thing can be true. She either witnessed it with her eyes or she heard about it subsequently. So they moved for a mistrial. The judge said no mistrial here. And the reasoning was pretty sound. They said, look, Judge Subramanian said, you had a Perry Mason moment. Good for you. You were able to expose this discrepancy and this inconsistency in the testimony in front of the jury, who can now assess the credibility of these witnesses and whether they believe the stories on the stand. But what this is not is grounds for throwing out the entirety of this trial. We've had a lot of resources expended. Trials take a long time, and there are a lot of resources put into them. Jason knows this. This is a particularly long one. This is going to be 8 weeks. They're not going to throw it out based on errors made along the way. They have to be so profound as to impair the outcome of the trial or change the outcome of the trial or hurt Diddy's sort of substantial rights to a fair trial. This didn't rise to the level.
So a couple points to be made. First, this kind of thing happens in every trial, especially every criminal trial, where a witness or two who are called by the prosecution or called by the defense are cross-examined. And under cross-examination, it is found that there's a mistake, there's an inconsistency in their testimony, there is maybe even a lie is told in their testimony. That is not reason to throw out the case altogether. If it's in this case, the prosecution, it's not a reason to declare a mistrial. It is a reason to be able to argue to the jury, see, there's no credibility in these prosecution witnesses. You shouldn't believe anything they're saying. They're here to lie. You can argue those points in closing. The jury hears this stuff.
Yes.
They hear the inconsistency, and they're going to weigh that. But the idea that it's going to result in tossing out the entire trial. And by the way, a mistrial doesn't mean Diddy goes free. A mistrial means he goes back to prison and waits for a new trial to happen. Now, it gives the defense certain advantages. They understand now what the witnesses are going to testify to. They can be better prepared, et cetera, et cetera. But nevertheless, they want to declare a mistrial. We would have mistrials. If this was the standard for a mistrial, we'd have mistrials in 65% of all cases.
All the time. I mean, if every error in a trial, every objection that's either sustained or overruled, some of those are wrong along the way, and you are preserving these issues, you can bring them up on appeal. A lot of them will be tossed aside as what is called harmless error that occurs but didn't affect the outcome in any meaningful way. They may raise this on appeal if Diddy loses, but even on appeal, I don't think this is going to sort of be a groundbreaking discovery that they can use to change the result of a trial. Contrast this with Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin, the allegation where that case was found to be a mistrial and he was set free was because of prosecutorial misconduct. The allegation was that the prosecutors actually destroyed evidence.
Right.
That's of a material difference. It's a difference in kind, not just degree, to say that the prosecutors sort of hid evidence or destroyed evidence that might have exonerated Alec Baldwin than to say that they made a mistake and some testimony came out that's inconsistent. That stuff is for the jury.
And remember what the judge said in the Alec Baldwin case, just to put a bow on this, is that they said this is not the kind of error by the prosecution that can be cured. It's not like you can put witnesses on to explain the discrepancy or whatever it is. This is something you've now destroyed evidence. I have no choice but to declare a mistrial. And frankly, it's up to you, prosecution, if you're going to try to retry them. But I don't think it's possible because this evidence is now gone into the wind. It's now been tampered with. There's a lack of chain of custody, all this stuff.
Yeah.
A very difficult time. That's very different than simply a witness who contradicted herself or was caught in maybe a fabrication on the stand. They can argue those points in closing arguments, but for right now, that's not enough to overturn the case.
So this mistrial motion has failed. This doesn't mean this will be the last one. You may see, these are zealous advocates, and they're looking for anything, but the judge did express a little annoyance.
Right. Yeah, he did sort of say, like, is this the third one of these you brought? And they said, no, Your Honor, it's only the second.
Right.
But it showed that the judge is kind of getting a little weary of these. But to your point, they're just trying to not establish this one issue as being something that might get an overturn on appeal. But they're going to have all of these issues, and they said they're all cumulative. And if you take them all together, maybe, Your Honor, this was not a fair trial, and this should be overturned on appeal. Maybe give them a new trial.
That's right. We'll see if it gets anywhere. So put a pin in that.
Let's go to Jane now.
Let's get into Jane's testimony. This is, I believe, her fourth day of testimony. She has had testimony dating back to last week. A lot of direct examination where she's describing her relationship, the origins of it with Diddy, what the sexual parameters of that relationship was. This is the woman who dated Diddy during an extensive period after he broke up with Cassie, and basically until he was arrested. She was with him all the way until the bitter end. And on her testimony, she's also said he still pays some of her rent. Yeah. So this is a very different situation than Cassie.
The relationship very similar to Cassie in that they were sort of boyfriend-girlfriend, but there was an openness to the relationship. He described it as polyamorous, whatever. He was having sex with other people at the same time. When they would have sex, often it would include third parties. In these freak-offs, they would bring in male escorts, and he would watch as Jane and the male escorts had sex, and this got him off. This was something he enjoyed.
That's right. She's described this in lurid detail. She said, this is sort of cuckolding. Yes. Diddy is into this. She described the baby oil. She described all of the freak-offs in very, very lurid detail. What is missing for me with this witness is that this seems like a transactional relationship. And what I mean when I say a transactional relationship, I mean all parties are on board. They're all consenting to the terms of a polyamorous relationship, and it seems very different than what Cassie testified to. Cassie testified to elements of coercion, of force, of violence. You know, she was beat up in that hotel room while trying to escape. She was shown sex tapes and implicitly threatened that he would release them if she didn't continue to participate in freak-offs. This witness seemed to be wanting to have more of a relationship with Diddy. And being upset and giving into his desires.
I actually think this harms the prosecution case by putting up this witness because it makes it seem this witness describes a fully transactional relationship. I mean, maybe you can argue there's sort of latent prostitution going on here, but remember, he's not on trial for that, right? So because there is prostitution angles, but it's only about bringing people across state lines. That has nothing to do with what's happening here. So she's basically saying, yes, I felt pressured to have sex with him. What was that pressure? Well, I thought he wouldn't want to see me anymore unless I did this. I thought he wouldn't buy me really nice things. One thing she expressed displeasure about is that he was buying other women really expensive handbags and she wasn't getting them. And she was pissed off about that. Again, there's no judgment here. She can do whatever she wants. If he wants to pay, he can pay, and she can receive the financial support and want more. But the idea that there's anything unlawful being described here, I'm not seeing it at all.
Yeah, it's very difficult to make sense of this. She even describes sort of jealousy, wanting more of Diddy's attention. You know, there was a period of time when Diddy was very publicly with a woman named Young Miami. You remember this period of Diddy?
Of course.
She describes this. She was in the background of that. She was jealous of him giving attention to other women, him giving gifts to other women. She described a lot of this in testimony. And I think, to your point, it's backfiring because even on direct testimony, it's not as if this is being exposed on cross. I don't think she's wilting under a withering cross or anything like that. I just think the net effect of what she's saying doesn't sound anything like she was being coerced or forced into this relationship. I will say there's one exception where she described what was a very bad day, is how she described on the stand, where there was violence. She said she was running around the house. Diddy was breaking down doors after she described one of his paramours as so much younger than Diddy that it made him seem like a pedophile. And that apparently triggered him. Yeah. Just the interaction, just the accusation, even if it wasn't jest, unclear, that he sort of stormed around the house and there was a lot of violence. I do think that incident sounds terrifying, and I'm not excusing the conduct in any way, shape, or form, but to link that to the entirety of her participation in these freak-offs and hotel nights and so forth, as a result of that, I just think belies the truth.
So the prosecution put her on, obviously, to again paint him as a monster, especially this beating that you're talking about that she sustained at Diddy's hands when she joked or accused him or whatever it was of being a pedophile. He was very unhappy with that. He acted out physically and violently against her. And the jury's going to hear that, and it's going to reinforce some notions they have about Diddy. Clearly, it does for you and me. Right?
Absolutely. He's a monstrous person. Yes.
Monstrous person, right. But again, and I want to make sure that what we're saying here is just the four corners of the law. He is not on trial for domestic violence. There is no crime for which he is charged that resembles. Right. It has nothing to do with that. Instead, what they're trying to say is, see, jury, the prosecution's trying to say, see, jury, it didn't just happen to Cassie. He was somebody who has exerted control over people through force and through coercion. That's what they're trying to establish in order to get to the crimes. But I don't think they established that here. She doesn't even say in this situation that he was violent towards her because she refused to have sex with him, because she didn't want to be with him anymore, like Cassie did. Cassie testified to that she incurred violence because she dated other people. He blew up Kid Cudi's car. The testimony, right? But that's not what Jane is saying at all. Jane is simply saying, I wanted to be with him more and more and more, and I was upset that he didn't give me more of himself. That's very different. And my fear is, and the reason I say it's really backfiring potentially on the prosecution is, if the jury starts to see, well, maybe everything Diddy did was just financial transactions. That's what the defense has been arguing all along. And I think this witness maybe lends credence to that.
I sort of agree. I think the Cassie testimony is still strong enough on the sex trafficking by coercion. I think by adding this witness and sort of signaling to the jury that this is the next strongest witness we have to prove this case of sex trafficking and coercion, I do think it sort of undermines it. Now, again, there's testimony from Mia, who goes to, I believe, more of the RICO charges. That's also a pseudonym where she is alleging all sorts of terror.
Former employee. He acted with this giant criminal enterprise. Yeah, that's great testimony.
That seems more secure on the RICO front. This sex trafficking evidence has been less effective for me overall, and almost to your point, it's undermining what they had established so effectively with Cassie that I wonder why they didn't think, we have enough on this issue with Cassie's testimony.
And by the way, you don't need all this testimony to get in the one day he was really violent with her. You can still get that in, which I think is effective. You can still get that in without going into the step-by-step about all the things he bought her. And then her text messages saying, basically, I want more. I want more of you, and I want more of the goods that you buy from me. Diddy was paying for her apartment at $10,000 a month. She was giving him, over the course, in addition to the $10,000 a month over the course of the relationship, $150,000 in, I believe, in cash, plus handbags and all kinds of other things. What is Diddy?
And again, people may find that disgusting that he's paying her rent, but that is not a crime. Right. I mean, he's paying her rent. She is agreeing to be in a relationship. That characterizes a lot of relationships in this country. Let's go to some questions about this. Carter, that's my son's name, says...
Is it him?
I don't know if it's him. If he's online now, it'd be very interesting. He says, will they uncover any of the evidence they found during the raids?
Well, we don't know where some of this evidence is coming from, right? It's very possible that the videotape of the beating of Cassie they found during the raids. We haven't heard that. Some of the text messages, some of the other emails, they may have come off of computers in Diddy's house. We don't know where this information came.
But they've submitted a lot of pictures of things they've discovered in the raids. Early in the case, remember, they had the agents who conducted those raids, and then they would drop exhibits of pictures of drugs, pictures of hard drives.
Baby oil, the whole thing.
We've seen a lot of this stuff. It's unclear, as you said, where the hotel video came from, and I'm not sure we'll ever get the clear answer to that. Dana says, what about Juror 6? What is cause for dismissal of this juror? I realize this is currently under seal. However, I'm hearing the juror was snickering in court. Is snickering grounds for juror dismissal? This is alluding to, there was a juror who was relieved of their duties, kicked off the jury, so to speak. I'm unclear whether it was for snickering and whether that is adequate grounds. Some people said this is one of the maybe mistrial grounds if you have a juror who is misbehaving. What do you think of that, Jason?
It's definitely not grounds for mistrial. Jurors misbehave sometimes, or jurors snicker sometimes.
That's why we have alternates.
That's right. That's why we, perfectly well said. It's why we have alternates. And this happens again. This happens all the time. All the time. You are taking 12 people, well, 15, including the 18, including the alternates.
18
including the alternates, taking them out of their lives for 2 months.
Yes.
And you're going to have some jurors who are fed up, want to be done with it, aren't taking it seriously. And it's in the judge's discretion whether or not to relieve those people of the duties just because they don't think that person's capable of reaching a fair verdict. Now,
you can imagine the perverse incentives if you could just stock the jury with people who aren't taking it seriously so you could get a mistrial. It just doesn't work that way. They have the alternates. People do take it seriously for the most part, but you have the backups in case people need to be relieved.
Now, you can bet there were tons of questions asked of this juror. Why is it you don't want to serve anymore if they asked out? Or what is the conduct that she or he is engaged in that is causing us to want to get rid of this person? The judge does a very good job vetting that. He's not going to let people off the jury just because they kind of want to be off.
That's right. Let's go to JB Dub. Wasn't that the woman who hit him in his head when he was attempting to tie his shoes? I confess I don't know what that's about.
Neither do I.
So I'll go to Nikki's question, but if you have more on this, tune in tomorrow and give us a little more context, and we'll be happy to answer it. Nikki says, will Diddy actually go to jail?
He's convicted, you bet. He's going to go to jail for a couple decades is my question.
If he's convicted, goodbye. And the RICO charge, by the way, we've looked into this, is the most serious one. That's what he's facing, life imprisonment. That is the big fish for prosecutors. He faces, I think, up to 20 years on the sex trafficking and up to 10 years on the interstate transport of someone for purposes of commercial sex.
Even if convicted on all charges, I doubt we're looking anywhere near a life sentence, but I'm guessing anywhere from 12 to 25.
Yeah, which will feel like mostly a life sentence. He's not a young man.
He's it's mid-50s now.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's right. It's a long time.
Let's go to some comments. Spherical says, it's not that black and white. They were on 2 different pages about the relationship. She kept calling him her partner. It's not transactional to her if she wanted a relationship. I think that's true.
Yes,
but
that's the transaction we're sort of talking about.
That's
right.
Maybe
transactional is too broad of a term, but that's what we're talking about here. She was looking to have more of a relationship, and he was giving her things in exchange for that relationship.
I think that's right, and a lot of her subjective feelings are unclear to me. And Cassie was a little bit clearer to me that he was so violent that she felt scared. Here, I'm not clear if they were just nibbling around the edges of what the transaction was.
Yeah.
Jose Bardo says the courts lost a lot of credibility in my book when escorts were allowed to sue after rendering their services. It's an injustice.
I don't think that this court had anything to do with any lawsuits that have been filed. Those are all civil suits that had never before this judge. The escorts themselves testified to what they saw, what they witnessed. It really is distinct from the civil case. And it's never going to be that somebody who sued in a civil case is therefore not going to be able to testify as a witness in a criminal case. They're going to be cross-examined based on their monetary motives or whatever it might be, but they're not going to be excluded from testimony. Basically.
That's right. All right, couple more. Paul says he invested All right, couple more. Life After Death Connect says she was all about the Benjamins. He used his money to lure and snag many other women, all different.
We're seeing a lot of this from people who comment. We're seeing 2 sides of it, right? And many people simply suggest that a lot of people are just out for Diddy's money, which is undoubtedly true. We've seen that in civil cases, right? You and I have read all those civil lawsuits. We don't believe a good portion of them. We think they are money grabs.
We have a healthy degree of cynicism about the legal system and how it works as well.
So the question is, does the jury have that same cynicism? These witnesses have been very compelling. Cassie especially, very compelling in her description. And she is not motivated by money at all. She already got a settlement from him. She has nothing to gain from this, as did Mia, who also testified, got a civil settlement. She has nothing to do, no monetary gain here. As a matter of fact, there's some really downside risk to testifying against Diddy. Yeah. Some people have been threatened, injured, etc. And so, we don't want to cast aspersions that they're doing it for any reason except they believe it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. As a final point on all this, I will say this feels like potentially the first big misstep by the prosecution. I think things have been going very, very well in presenting this case against Diddy. The defense has scored a few wins in cross along the way, but it seemed like a tidal wave against Diddy. And all of a sudden, I think putting Jane up there and the nature of this testimony is starting to feel like the tide turning just a little bit.
More importantly than all this, the Behind the Bar podcast was featured on the Apple Music Apple podcast. Oh, sorry, not Apple. Darn Apple. Come on, Apple. the Behind the Bar podcast was featured on Apple Music's Amazon Music's podcast page today. Very exciting for us.
Yep.
Get it at Amazon.
Appreciate all you listening.
Anywhere else you get your podcasts, including Apple.
All right, tune back in. See you tomorrow.